Hi there, welcome to the Nautilus Drydocks. My name is Bob Martin. What I'd like to do today is take a few minutes and run through the build-up of the Voodoo FX lighting kit that's available with the models from the Nautilus Drydocks for the 31-inch and the 66-inch versions of the Nautilus. What you see here is the kit as you will receive it. You've got the board itself. It comes with a set of stranded wires, the resistors, heat shrink, some plastic tubing for directing light, the adapter for power. You've got the white LEDs, the diffused white LEDs for the interior, if you so choose to install, of course. Some green LEDs for the attack lighting, and of course a full set of instructions. What you're looking at here is my work area. The tools that you're going to need, I find very helpful, is this helping hands assembly. It's got some little grippers and magnifying glasses that help hold your work. Also going to need a set of standard side cutters, some masking tape, soldering iron, and some rosin core solder. Okay, I'm going to take a quick look at the board here first. What you see here are a series of holes that are going to accommodate the LED wires, the resistors, and they're set up in channels. There's channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, and channel 4, and each one has its own pot, which means that you can dim these lights infinitely between 0 brightness and full brightness. There's also accommodations for power switch for the main board, and power switches for each one of the channels. It's a very, very excellent product, and Randy at Voodoo FX did a great job. So one of the first things that we're going to do, I'm going to clip this in my handy helper here. I'm going to pull out a couple of my resistors so I can show you how we're going to start. What these do, they basically reduce the amount of voltage that the LEDs are going to be getting from your main drive voltage, which is 9 volts, and that drops it down to the proper voltage for the LEDs, which is going to be closer to 3. Taking a look at your board here, the resistor slots are the lower set, the smaller holes. Again, this is all in the instructions. What I do is I take the resistor, bend the top wire over so that both are pointing down. Now what I'm going to do is drop that into the slots so that it's sitting up like a little tower there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to load up my board and we'll move on to the next step. Alright, it's been about 2 or 3 minutes. What I've done is I have installed all of the resistors, or at least put them into place into channel 1. This is the main lighting circuit for the Nautilus. It's going to run all of the floodlights and the white LEDs for the exterior of the submarine. What I'm going to do now, because these are all loose and floppy, I'm just going to take some masking tape, rip off a length, and I'm going to put it over the top of these LEDs, stick it down to the side here, and what this is going to do is just going to keep them in place. When I get to the soldering part, Now you can see all of the wonderful legs of the LEDs sticking up from the back of the board, which is where we are going to play right now. While I've been doing this, I've had my soldering iron heating up. I've got my thin solder. You do not need to dwell on each one of these for very long at all. It should take about a second to heat it up to the proper temperature for the solder to liquidate and flow properly throughout the leg. Just got to make sure that the entire thing is filled, that you don't have a weak joint, otherwise you get some funny things that end up happening for you a little bit later on. So basically all we're going to do, I'm just going to put the tip right at the base, a little bit of a touch, and that one is soldered. Moving on to the next one, and so forth. Again, you want to make sure you get a nice shiny bead on the back of each one. Done one already. What I'm going to do is I'm going to continue through to finish up the rest of this channel, and we will move on to the next step. Alright, I've got the bottom leg of each one of these resistors soldered in. I just wanted to show you really quickly how fast this can actually go once you get a little bit of practice in. And please understand, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to run down here, just touch briefly on each leg, soldering it in. Like I said, it only takes a second for it to get heated up to the proper temperature for the solder to flow properly. Just make sure you get a nice bead around the base of each piece. And as I mentioned earlier, if you don't, especially for like the power leads, it can do some funny things to your board. So there you go. I just did the entire string of upper legs here. Now that that's all done, I'm just going to take my side cutters and just snip them off flush. Now these little legs, if you are a bit of a neat freak or if you're working inside a house, they get everywhere and they're a pain to pick up. They won't vacuum. So try and keep them on your workbench. There you go. You can see the backs have all been soldered in. I did remove the tape after I'd done the first string. Now you can see all of the resistors in a nice line. You can bend them so they're all standing perfectly straight if you're a bit of a perfectionist. And now what you're going to do is basically the same thing for channel 2, channel 3, which are both lighting channels. Channel 4, which you don't have to install any resistors in, was designed specifically for a little motor that would allow you to animate the propeller at the back of the Nautilus. So I'm going to move on to the next step. Okay, as I mentioned, we got the board with some resistors in there. I've got a second one here. You can see I've got all of the secondary lighting channels all lit up or installed for us. What I want to do now is work on the actual soldering of the LEDs to the wire, and this takes a little bit of a procedure, which I think I've gotten down. I'm just going to do one example. What I'm going to do, I'm going to cut off about 8 inches of this stranded wire, as you can see here. We're going to take one end, strip back about 3/8 of an inch. So you've got the bare wire, twist up the ends so they all hang out together nicely. I'm going to work on a white LED. I'm going to pop it out of the case now. I'm going to pull you guys a little bit closer so you can see this. with your LEDs, you've got two prongs, a long one and a short one. Your long one is your positive power. If you hook these up backwards, they will not work. You can tell it's, if you do manage to snip the legs and you can't tell the difference, if you look inside the clear plastic of the LED itself, there are two sections. There is one that goes over top and one that goes underneath. Your positive lead is the one that goes underneath. So here we've got our LED. I'm just going to split the legs apart a little bit here. Before we get any further, I'm going to snip off about 1/2 inch of heat shrink. I'm going to put it on the positive lead. Now I'm going to take my LED and the positive wire, the white wire, I'm going to wrap the wire around the little leg. You can see it right there, it's wrapped around. I'm going to push it up so it's nice and tight to the LED itself. Now I'm going to crimp it in my handy helper. Pull out your solder, touch it again, just takes a second, boom, that has been soldered. Just going to twist this around now, wrap the negative wire, the black wire, around the negative pole of the LED, crimp, solder, and technically the LED should function now if I put power through the wires. I'm going to carefully snip off the legs of the LED that go up beyond the wire, so you can see now that the legs are much shorter. Push your heat shrink up a little higher on there so it's nice and tight. Now I use a lighter to heat this up. Probably not the safest thing. You can use a heat gun too. I find it's just a lot faster to do it that way. But once you have this all in place, you can just twist this wire back up again, and you have a nice, tight, neat LED. That's one down, only about 30 more to go. Here's another little bit of a handy hint that might save some frustration down the road for you. What I'm going to do, I've got my completed and heat shrinked LED light right here. I'm going to strip off the ends. The opposite end, you only need about 1/4 inch stripped, but again, this is not a huge deal. These are all very approximate measurements. I've got here from All Electric an LED tester, which is a pretty slick little unit. Basically runs off a 9-volt battery and allows you to run different levels of forward current through LEDs to test them for functionality and brightness. What I'm going to do is theoretically insert these ends into their appropriate slots, negative for negative, positive for positive. Now when I hit my test button, you can see the LED lighting up. Now I just want you to notice something here. I'm going to blind you guys for a second. This is shining directly at you, and you can see as I move it, you actually lose a lot of the brightness, which isn't super desirable in this Nautilus model. You want to have a good field of view. So here's a little tip. Take a Dremel, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind the tip of this LED flat very quickly. So you can see I've got a nice flat tip on there. I'm going to show you the difference. When you turn this to the side, you've actually got a very good field of view on the light. And it also dims down slightly the brightness when you're looking head on. So there's a little tip for you next time you build your models and you don't want a focused beam of light being emitted. Just grind the tip flat. It takes just a little bit of time with a Dremel or a file or a piece of sandpaper, and it makes for a much better lighting effect. Alright, what I've got here is one of the 38-inch Nautilus model kits. This is how it comes right out of the box. Scott Brodeen does an absolutely amazing job putting these together. The fitment is absolutely excellent. But what I want to show you here really quickly as it pertains to the lighting module is just where I situate things. I'm going to pop the top off here for you. You can still see I've got some styrofoam peanuts hiding on the inside here. Lighting module fits neatly right in the base. Now, if you still want access to the pots, what you can actually do is mount this just slightly forward, and in the bottom of the model that you're not actually going to see, if you put 4 small holes, that'll allow access to the pots, where you can actually adjust your dimness if you decide that you want it a little bit brighter or a little bit dimmer after you've displayed it for a while. But at any rate, as you can see, it tucks neatly in the bottom. These power leads for the side floodlights, of which there are 16 on the 2 sides for the salon, you can see you've got a lot of slack here. Again, I made them 8 inches long, 6 would be plenty. They're just going to tuck in the sides and press through 2 longer leads coming up the front and into the wheelhouse portion, usually coming up where I like to put them, right in the corners of the wheelhouse, popping up, running along the inside of the wheelhouse, and then of course out the alligator eyes, as we like to call them. I'd mentioned the power lead before. You can see the hole for the bottom hatch. I usually, or have in the past, put that adapter for the power converter right here, so you just open the lower hatch and plug in your lights. As I mentioned before, however, where I've evolved into is with the display stand, goes right in between these ballast vents on the bottom. If you put a hole right here on the back side of your model, so you're never going to see it, you can run your power cord up your display stand and plug it in to the model that way. You don't see any cords. It's a little bit of a neater install, although you are drilling into the side of the model if you are a bit of a perfectionist. Alright, here's just a little bit more as it pertains to the lighting of the wheelhouse, which is probably one of the trickiest parts of the installation of the lighting. It has to be done at a little bit of a later time. What I do is I drill 2 holes from the inside and 2 holes from the outside that end up intersecting each other inside the alligator eyes themselves. Put the lights in from the outside, pull them through, and I run the wire down the inside crease of the wheelhouse. So what you're going to end up with is a long tail coming out of each corner of the wheelhouse after you get your lights installed. What you're going to do on the main hull is drill 2 more holes in the wheelhouse floor that will, of course, intersect the wires that are going to be coming from the wheelhouse. You're going to run those down and out the bottom of the upper hull. Now, what that means is that basically you're going to be doing those last 4 solders for the 4 wires after you've got basically the model primed and ready to go, because you need to solder those last connections to your board that's going to be in your lower hull, and then at that point you can finally secure your upper and lower halves together and move on to the final stages of your build-up. Alright, so what I'm going to move on to here really quickly is installing my light into my board. If you take a look at the board itself, you can see that it is actually labeled negative and positive. Randy was thinking. White wire is positive, black wire is negative. I'm going to put this right in the middle. I'm going to put the wire through the respective holes. You can see them coming out. Now I'm just going to fold them over a little bit just so that they hold the wire in position while I'm soldering. I'm going to flip it over, grab my soldering, just a little touch here. And the wire has been installed. Side cutters, trim off the excess, and there you go. One light installed on the Nautilus Drydocks lighting module. That's basically all of the steps that you're going to need to take, obviously a lot more of them. The only other ones that you're going to need to look at here, this is your main power lead coming out of here, negative and positive, again conveniently labeled for you. Those are going to run out and you're going to tie that into your 9-volt power source that comes with the kit. You can use this adapter so that it plugs in nicely. This hides neatly in the lower hatch of the Nautilus if you choose to put it there, or where I like to put it, just over the display stand where it touches the Nautilus, so you don't see any cables sticking out from underneath the model itself. These pots can be turned left and right. That's going to adjust the brightness of your LEDs, and in the case of channel 4, it's going to control the speed of your motor. For your side lights, 8 inches is going to be plenty of wire. You can put this right in the middle of the model. 6 inches is probably closer to what you need. You want to make sure that you're not going to run out, but you also don't want a huge rat's nest of cables in the middle of your model. The leads for the wheelhouse are going to need to be longer. They're going to be around 14 inches, but I'd leave lots of extra there so that you can play with those when you're installing the wheelhouse itself. So there you go. That is the Voodoo Effects lighting kit for the Nautilus Drydocks 31 and 66 inch model kits. I hope this is helpful to you. If you have any questions, you can at any time email me, bob@rc-sub.com. I hope to see from you soon.